Hello and welcome to another interview of The Power in Your Story. I'm Marianne, your confident communication expert, helping you speak your truth through story. And today I'm excited to be talking with Irene Caniano, a productivity coach. Welcome, Irene.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to be here too. And I'm really looking forward to this because Irene and I have talked, we've been talking quite regularly, haven't we?
Yes.
I'm always curious because I get a chance this time to have a deeper dive into Irene's story. So you'll be joining me hearing things that I haven't heard before. So I'm really looking forward to this. So Irene, I introduced you as a productivity coach. Tell us a little bit more what that involves for you.
Well, I think productivity coaching is helping someone to reach their goals. So it's part of planning, seeing what their obstacles have been, and also using some of the skills and techniques and supports that I've learned through my coaching so that anything that might be blocking them from attention to lack of confidence, we can deal with. And that can be a breakthrough so that they can get a strategy for reaching their goals. And they model one experience. And when they succeed in that, they can use that in other experiences. They have a whole set of tools by then.
Oh, that's lovely. And I think this is something that is, I mean, being more productive is something that's useful, whether it's our personal life or our business life. And I know that you've got a particular age group you focus on.
Yes, I work with 20s and 30s. And I think that comes from my leaning that I was a teacher. And I felt that when people leave school, they don't have supports and they're thrown into the real world with many decisions that they have to make. And also, I felt people like my son who had ADHD, they don't have the supports and they're really thrown into the world really unprepared, dealing with their own challenges. So I felt 20s and 30s are the time to work out some of the things to give you some heads up on life.
Lovely, bridging the gap. So with your experience as a teacher, you saw that there was this gap, as you say, bye-bye guys, have a great career, and then where's that support? So that's what you're doing. Lovely. So how did all this start? What brought you to this work as a productivity coach?
Well, what I'll say is my story is that I end up working with 20s and 30-year-olds because this becomes a passion of mine, why this particular group is so important. And that's because my experience that I had very much later in life, if I had had that earlier, it could have opened so many doors for me. And I didn't even realize that I was missing something until I experienced coaching. So now I say the sooner the better you can get coaching, the better for you. And I'll start chronologically with my story, if that's okay. I'm going to say that my story.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask you, at what point in your life did you have that coaching? Was that during your teaching?
When I decided to leave teaching and become a coach, I didn't realize you go through it all yourself. And I thought it was just going to be a person who learns some skills and teaches the 20-year-old something. And then I realized, no, you work to dive deep into their lives, and we're going to dive into yours first. But it was a very positive experience. It was not at all frightening, but it was that you take time and you think about, are there any things that are holding you back? And you kind of discover things. But it's a really enlightening period. And everyone in the course said, even if I don't get one client, my first client was me, and it worked out beautifully, and money was worth it. So that's how powerful it was.
Wow, that is a wonderful testimony.
The coaching
really, just the whole course. Even if I don't get a client, I've got so much value because it's made a difference in my life. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, sorry I interrupted you. We can always come back to that, but I know you wanted to go back a bit further.
Yeah, so I feel like sometimes you have a story from our childhood that carries all the way through, and if nobody stops the story and reframes it, it just goes on and on unconsciously. So I'll give you a little background. My father was a Chinese immigrant, and my mother was first generation Italian. So when they got married, my mother lost half her family because they disowned her. But meanwhile, where they created a family life that was very secure for us and very relaxed, loving, no drama household, and
Really?
just
Wow.
a great place to be. So then at 6 years old, they sent me off to a strict Catholic school because they wanted me to get a good education. And I was getting a good education, first grade, no kindergarten, straight to work. And one day a child was in the hall talking and the teacher pulled the child off the line and reprimanded the child. But to me, I remember it as the teacher yanked the kid off the line and screamed at him. And that's how I interpreted that discipline, because I wasn't used to raised voices or any of that kind of serious reprimands. And I think that unconsciously, now that I look back, I made a rule for myself: stay out of the spotlight, because when you're in the spotlight, people can catch you doing something and really be mean to you. So better to be very quiet, unless you're in your family or with friends or people you really trust, be very cautious. So that was the rule. And I went into my career, but I was never one of the people who volunteered for committees or anything like that. So
Wow.
I was happy. I'm happy in my life up to that, up until I went to coaching and I saw there was a broader life. And that's what I want to bring to the 20 somethings, because when I reframed the story, everything opened to me. So I realized I had a hole to punch in that story, because I started to say, am I looking at this as a person who's an adult or a 6-year-old? And did that 6-year-old interpret it correctly or not? Or is there any other possibilities for that story? And then I made an observation in my memory that one day my father took me to the lumber yard and we were shopping for wood, because he was always doing construction in the house. And he proudly introduced me as his daughter, as if I was so special. And I said, that was being in the spotlight, and I didn't have any problem with that. So don't limit the spotlight story so much. Then I rewrote the story. And I said, what if I could help other people become more productive early in life and help them rewrite their story? I mean, wouldn't that open up their lives when they're young? And they could do so much more than they thought they were capable of.
Beautiful. So, how old were you when your father took you on his journey, on his shopping for timber? How old were you then?
I was around 8. It's funny, and it's a funny thing that I remember that very simple moment. But I thought that only after I started saying, "Have I ever been in a situation where I felt comfortable?" And that somehow came to my memory. Of course, I was with my father, but I was with a stranger. So there was a stranger that I was being presented to. So I kind of understood it was a very limiting thing that I was doing about the teacher experience that I had. And it was only an observation that I blew up in my mind.
Beautiful. So you sort of challenged it, very powerful. And then you started to see, oh, okay. But so you were about 6 when you went to school, and just going back a bit further, I guess you didn't get to meet any of your mother's family, because
well, we did meet half my mother's family. Some of her, she was one of 10, and some of her brothers and sisters stayed close to her, and at least half of them did not. So she lost a lot of siblings on the way, which later, like years later, I mean, I'm talking decades later, things changed. So, but that didn't really interfere me, because I didn't even know that story at that time. But I realized why my parents were so tight knit, and that I realized I was in a special kind of family unit because of the way they were trying very hard to make sure that their home was a very stable and loving home.
To sort of compensate for what was happening, they wanted to give extra.
Family.
Yeah. Beautiful. And did you have siblings?
Yeah, brother and sister and another brother. So we had 4 of us. We were, and yeah, it was just a great childhood. And I really do think that was part of it, is that they came from a hardship, and when they went into the marriage, the commitment maybe was even deeper than it would have been.
And had your father, being a Chinese immigrant, had he recently immigrated to?
My father had immigrated about 20 years earlier.
Well, with his family.
No, alone. So he was very alone in the world, except for the few Chinese fellows he knew.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of prejudice against Chinese before the, with the Chinese Exclusion Act in America. We actually had a Chinese Exclusion Act that they weren't allowed to come into the country. They weren't allowed to bring family members over. If they had been come for work, they had work visas, they were allowed to. But once they came, they were not allowed to bring family members. And then there was just a lot of prejudice against Chinese at that time. So it wasn't that my mother's family was so out of step with the world, because that was the current conditions.
It sort of
So
reflected the world. Yeah.
Yeah. My mother was working in my father's business, helping him out, and that's how their relationship grew.
Oh,
so that is like that kind of friendship that grew into a relationship.
Beautiful. Just, do you speak either Italian or Chinese?
No, and I think I thought of that many times, that it would have been a benefit for two reasons. First of all, being Chinese was not something you wanted to really put out there too much. The prejudice was so bad. And secondly, I think it would have been too much on my mother having to pick up the language. With us picking up the language, I think they just decided to go the American way as they could and make sure we were educated. They did promise themselves that we would all graduate college. That was their goal.
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful.
That was instead to get them into the American system, and that we would be able to have a career.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it was an incident that you really wanted to, so powerful, so important, guys, that stories from our childhood can have such a powerful impact on us for decades, I guess, in Irene's case, but for so many of us. And sometimes we don't always remember the story, but for you, Irene, it was a story that was quite prominent. Is that right?
Yes, it was. I was always limiting myself when I was at meetings. I would never join any groups or anything. And I just thought it was the way I was. But then when I went to coaching, they asked, when did you start thinking that way? So they brought out the story, and I could clearly remember what happened, but they brought out, where did it start? And then you can chip it away because you know where it started.
Yes.
But otherwise, I really wasn't referring to that story, because all of us who grew up in strict Catholic schools have a story, and we would share stories. I mean, we would laugh at the stories, but I never realized that some of us are really subconsciously acting very differently because of that memory that we blew up in our minds.
Yes, so many of us, there will be some story, as you say, we blew up or gave some interpretation to, and it can have a really powerful effect on us. So very powerful. So there you were, a 6-year-old deciding, I think it might be safer for me to keep out of the limelight, out of the spotlight. And did that have, and so you didn't tend to join societies. Did it have an impact? I mean, you still decided to teach. How did you feel about that? Because I guess you still have to get up in front of the class and teach.
Yeah,
how that?
I love working with children, and that put everything in a different limelight. And I'm going to have these children, we're going to have a nice little group of ourselves in that classroom, and we're going to do fine. And we did. And that's how I did it. I didn't go down to the supervisor all the time to chat. That wasn't my style. But I did definitely enjoy the children and my colleagues. They were relationships that were one-to-one, which was always easy for me. My colleagues one-to-one, and my students, I would get to know them one-to-one. So that didn't feel like didn't feel intimidating at all.
Oh, that's lovely. And they were quite small children as well, weren't they?
Second grade.
Which is lovely. Then they're more accepting and open, aren't they, at that age, which is so lovely. Yes, yes. Did it affect you in any other way then, until you realized it when you did this life coaching? Did it affect you in speaking up or anything like that?
In a lot of ways. First of all, I was never very assertive in anything. Like if someone made a mistake, I would never point it out. If I needed something, I would advocate for it. I would just kind of go with the flow. So that way I felt I wasn't fully living. I was happy with my life, but I didn't realize it was a fuller life for me. And when I got my certification to be a life coach, I realized that you cannot stay out of the spotlight. You have to be in the spotlight to promote yourself as a coach. So at that point, I started turning things around and took opportunities like to go on a cable TV show or to go on a podcast, because you know you are going to give people a service by giving them the chance to have coaching, because that was my thing, get coaching to as many people as possible.
Beautiful. That's so powerful. So you actually encouraged yourself to do a few sort of public speaking events. And how did that feel after your coaching?
Yeah, that felt good. And I realized it wasn't such a hard, it was actually a pleasant thing to do. And from that,
it was a pleasant thing.
It was a pleasant thing to do. It was. And I also then decided, I could be part of volunteer organizations, because I wanted to be part of more things. Now I became a groupie. I call myself a groupie at that point, because now I wanted to join groups. It was something that I realized I hadn't experienced, and I really thought it would be nice to be doing something with a goal with the group. So I joined the Lions Club, I joined Toastmasters, and I joined CHAD, which helps people who have ADHD. So those were ways I felt I could now experience giving in a different way and learning in a different way.
And you left you left teaching, your teaching career, to become I guess, was that an ADHD coach to begin with?
ADHD coach, which gradually became I branched out to productivity coach. So I did start with the ADHD community. I thought they needed the coaching experience, because that's something that the schools never offered. Obviously, it wasn't a part of the school system, and coaching one-to-one would be so much more beneficial. So that was the original way I went into coaching, was ADHD.
Right, but the productivity just made sense to you, because it just broadened the horizon to 20s and 30-year-olds that still needed the help with that productivity and their confidence to get out and reach their goals. Beautiful.
Yeah, what happened was, I'll explain. I had a client, the first client I ever had, and I started seeing that he was bringing up issues that was not related to his ADHD, how hard it was to think about getting a job, how he was going to try to tell his mother that she's really interfering too much in his life, how he wanted independence, and how is he going to bridge over to independence from where he was. And this was nothing to do with ADHD. And then I had other clients, one after the other, and other issues were coming up that had nothing to do with ADHD, but had to do with them being more productive. So I realized this is a general 20-something issue. That's why I broadened too.
Beautiful, beautiful. And going back to your life coaching time, once I know you described yourself as being happy beforehand, but there was something maybe drawing you back, and you just hadn't really put the finger on it until your life coaching. How did it feel when you had that aha moment?
Well, it was interesting. First of all, we coached each other on a supervisionist. So when you're watching each person being coached, you see them like, oh my gosh, they're like learning something for the first time in their life. Now, some of the people would have picked it up already, and maybe none of us were aware of it. But for them, it was like the most important discovery of their lifetime. And then over time, all of us get to that aha moment. And it's because we're opening up and we're looking with fresh eyes. And they're bringing up different ways we block ourselves. So it was something that I think the group helped us a lot, because we were all wanting to become more authentic and to be fully living. And all of us wanted to contribute more to the world, and we knew we had to be more empowered to do it. So we wanted to be able to reflect ourselves on anything that we might have big goals for.
And how did it feel for you?
Yeah, well, for me, definitely, because I had started seeing my life change, then I said, but this is the thing. This is the one thing that really was holding it back. And then I don't know why it was, but one thing after another just came. First somebody asked me to be a part of a podcast because we were very friendly, and she brought it up. And then I got on another podcast, And then I asked somebody to put me on another podcast. So it just became opening up doors, and knowing that I don't have to be so fearful of every opportunity I take. So it was just like a breath of fresh air, and seeing things differently, very differently. I think people might have had that experience when they get an insight if someone tells them something, but sometimes we're not open enough to see it at certain times. And sometimes you have to be really in the place where you're searching for the answer or open for the answer. And then you'll be able to navigate through it very easily.
Very, very beautifully put, because yes, you could have a coach dig as deep as they want. But if you're sort of saying, if you shut the doors, then you're not going to get a result. Beautiful, beautiful. So breath of fresh air, that's wonderful. And sort of rewriting of the story now, I guess you can look back at that story and just see it as another story, another event.
Right, right.
Beautiful.
So many more events in your life that you could be looking at, and that unconscious event is stuck in your head, really taking charge of your life. It is astounding to think of that could be possible, but it is.
Yes, yes. And that's going to be a wonderful thing as well for the productivity and the confidence of your 20 and 30-year-olds, because they'll all have their own stories, won't they? That might be holding them back. So that's a wonderful journey, and how though it really shows us that, guys, that Irene's had this powerful story of actually that takes her back to age 6. One incident that was so powerful in her memory, in her subconscious, but took all those decades to sort of unravel and think, okay, and let it go with the breath of fresh air. So though it's led her on different ways on her path, until she's arrived at this point of being an entrepreneur and a productivity coach. And it really just shows how our experiences, I mean, how would you say it's that experience has now helped you as a coach, actually seeing the effect it had on you?
Yes. The thing is that the coaching environment is a very safe environment. It's confidential, and it's a very trusting relationship. And it's also a place where the person who's being coached takes the center stage, in the sense that they lead the agenda. So if one day they feel they're concerned about something, that's the topic of the day. I'm not planning it. It's very spontaneous. But once we get to talking, then I can lead the conversation to the discovery of more insights. So I think the setting is very important, that I experienced that safe feeling of being with people I trusted. I felt I was in good hands. I knew this guidance could help me. I saw it help so many other people. And how many people do you talk to for a half hour about yourself and what's really important to you? It's usually somebody interjecting their ideas, their experiences, and the conversations have taken give and take. But if this is a conversation where it's about only one person agenda, and it's a unique experience for people. They've never been listened to like that.
That's very true. True listening is quite a deep skill, and many people don't do proper listening. And that half an hour is a very special time. And I guess also having made your discovery with the in the life coaching, you realized also how precious it was, that you're not quite sure what might come up, but it's going to be valuable to them, because you didn't know what was going to come up, but it was valuable to you.
And another very important thing about coaching, it's non-judgmental. So if somebody had to say something that feel they could not say to a parent, they could not say to a friend, they could tell the coach without any judgment. There's no judgment at all. We know that everybody's moving forward. That's all we're caring about, right? So whatever happened, we go moving forward. And I think that lifts such a weight off people, that they can finally tell somebody what's really on their mind. Or maybe they have a giant goal and they think everybody's going to laugh them off the face of the earth. So they're finally going to be able to tell somebody that dream they have, and that person's not going to poo-poo it. So it's a different kind of relationship when you have a coach. It's a different kind of feeling in the conversation, and coaches listen at a different way, in a different level, because a lot of training is on listening and communication in coaching. So that's very important too. That helps things move along in the conversation that isn't like a regular conversation.
No, very important, great place to end. And how can I underline that? This is so important, the listening and the non-judgment, because we do live in a world that doesn't listen as much as it could do and is too judgmental. So it's a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that powerful story. I know it's wonderful and always very exciting to hear how a story from decades past can suddenly release its chains from you and set you free to do the work that you are supposed to do. And that's beautiful. And I hope you enjoyed this, guys. And if you want to learn how to craft your story more, there's a link below about using your story when speaking. And now, Irene, how, for the 20 to 30-year-olds, what's the best way to get in touch with you? I know you mentioned, I think, a Facebook group.
Right. I have a Facebook group. It's called Designing Happy and Successful Lives, because we're being proactive, designing happy and productive lives. We have a skill of the month. We have people interacting, and we have guest speakers that come on to talk about their experiences. And then that's Designing Happy and Successful Lives Facebook group. And then otherwise, it's just irenecaniano.com, and then they could find things from there. And I do have an upcoming challenge coming that's a free opportunity for people. So I'd like you to keep in touch and see if you'd like to take yourself onto that challenge. It's a 5-day confidence challenge.
Well, I'll put the title of that Facebook group. I will put it in the in the show notes so that they've got that and can immediately get in touch with you and connect with you there as well and get lots of valuable information. Irene, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you and your audience.
Thanks very much for listening, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.